let's talk about Wade Whipple and Knuckles.
Got to say, in all honesty,
So the Knuckles series is finally out now, exclusively on Paramount Plus. It takes place after movie 2 and before movie 3, but honestly, for the most part, it's pretty self-contained and very different to the movies. It has 6 episodes that are around 30 minutes or less, and well, it is definitely the show of all time. For context, I just want to preface the video by saying that I thought the first movie was a pretty solid introduction to the movie Sonic universe. Jim Carrey stole the show as Robotnik, the redesigned Sonic was awesome to see on the big screen. And although I would have preferred having the movie look animated just like the Mario movie, I was okay with the live action adaptation. To be honest, I was just happy that the movie didn't turn out to be a massive train wreck that could have done irreparable damage to the franchise for years to come, so even if it was okay, I would have taken that over disastrously bad. Movie 2 is what made me a little bit more accepting of them choosing to go the live action route because, well, it really took advantage of all the amazing parts of the source material and it focused on Sonic and Co. much more than the human characters that time around. Honestly, when done right, like with movie 2, you can actually get way cooler moments in live action than you ever could in an animated movie because it's a lot more realistic looking. That being said, I want to make something very, very clear early on. This show is nothing like the movies, and it absolutely knows that because it really isn't trying to be. If you're going into the show expecting to get something similar to the movies but focusing on really fleshing out Knuckles' character and recreating or adding to the lore of the games, you're gonna be really disappointed. I was following the info drops about the show early on before we ever got any official marketing and footage, and I actually expected everything we saw in the show. You know, a cheesy sort of lighthearted comedy where Knuckles trains Wade to become a warrior, but I'm just surprised that Knuckles almost entirely plays second fiddle to Wade the whole time. In fact, he's physically noticeably absent for a large chunk of the show's runtime. Even though I had a good idea of what we're going to be getting based on, me following the leaks and stuff, I can't blame you for expecting a movie-like continuation because all of the marketing is clearly putting massive emphasis on Knuckles, so it's completely valid to expect a Knuckles-centric show. But, like I said earlier, this is first and foremost the Wade Whipple show set in the Sonic universe with cameo appearances from Knuckles. So yeah, it isn't exactly what I thought it would be like, and definitely wasn't the type of show that I was hoping for, but that doesn't necessarily mean it still can't be a fun time, as long as it accomplishes what it sets out to do well enough, right? Well, it sorta does, kinda. I mean, it really depends on who you ask. Now, because the show falls under 2 main genres, action-adventure and comedy, a lot of the show's enjoyment relies on having pretty cool fight scenes and hilarious jokes. And unfortunately, for as cool as the action scenes were, and I will admit they were really cool, they were just very few and far between because a good portion of the show involves characters just standing around and talking to each other. And when it comes to the jokes, I know that comedy is really subjective, so it's cool if the show made you laugh, but half the humor didn't do it for me. I mean, sometimes it felt like generic family movie comedy. That's pretty much it for the spoiler-free part of the review. I'm gonna get into the specifics of each of the episodes now, so if you don't want to get spoiled, come back to the video when you're done watching the show. Get ready for a crazy in-depth discussion about bowling, father abandonment issues, TJ Maxx, FBI agents, legendary product placement, and low-budget rock operas. So, episode 1's called The Warrior. The show starts off with a bit of bait low-key, cause it shows Knuckles training by making his way through an obstacle course that's meant to feel like an actual level from the games. It even ends with him spinning a goal plate, which is really cool. We're reintroduced to Knuckles from movie 2, of course, who still has that lovable personality from that movie. Unlike Sonic, he don't chuckle, cause he still takes everything very seriously, and it works really well when juxtaposed with all the lighthearted settings in the show. Personally, I think some of the best humor comes from Knuckles alone, just because of his perfect comedic timing. I'd show you guys clips, but I haven't done movie or show reviews before, so I don't know how movie companies get with that type of thing, but I'd imagine they'd probably send an entire SWAT team to my house and blow my brains out on the spot. So you guys are gonna have to just trust me, bro. If you remember from the second movie, just like in the games, he was introduced to us as the last Echidna warrior of his tribe after a war between the Owls and the Echidnas, and in this universe, he's still adjusting to life on Earth, and because of that, you're going to be constantly reminded that he won't know what certain things mean, and it's kind of funny at times, but can be a little repetitive. We also get reintroduced to the big man himself, Wade, who was mostly a forgettable side character from movie 2, literally only showing up in some cutaway gags here and there, and man, yeah, I really hope you liked him in those brief appearances because you're going to be spending what feels like 90% of the show with him. His character is intentionally written as a bit of a scrawny goofball, not really all that well respected, doesn't seem to be good at anything really. I mean, he literally gets destroyed at bowling by a little girl, so his entire character arc in the show revolves around him learning to get good and not skill issue at bowling. I'm dead serious. Knuckles gets a visit from the ghost of Chief Pac-Man, I don't know, man. Bruh, I'm a Sonic fan and this is even hard for me to pronounce. He's meant to be more of the sort of comic relief character of the show, which is really different to his interpretation in SA1, but I can't deny that this is more memorable. Don't kill me, Sonic Adventure fans. He really doesn't know how to be a ghost, and it got a few chuckles out of me just seeing him trip and fall through the floor and get stuck trying to escape the attic window. Pachacamac tells Knuckles to train Wade to become a legendary warrior to continue the Echidna lineage, I guess, but since Wade isn't exactly a macho man with fists of fury, Knuckles teaches him the ways of the Echidna warrior by helping him win a bowling tournament. Like I said, the show's premise is intentionally really goofy, so you gotta go in with that in mind. We also get a really small peek at Gun HQ, and we meet Agent Mason, played by rap legend Kid Cudi, and Agent Willoughby, both actually working for someone named, I kid you not, the Buyer, and they're trying to capture Knuckles to sell his power for profit. Mason's the homie because he's more like a chill, laid back kind of agent, while Willoughby is more of the strict, no nonsense, let's get to work type of person. And they sort of establish their personalities early on in that first scene. We then cut to a scene in a bowling alley where Wade explains to Knuckles that this is his personal battleground, and he talks about how he got into bowling because of his dad, and that his dad abandoned him at a TJ Maxx, which is a discount department store in the US for all my non-American viewers out there, myself included. I feel like the only reason this is brought up so often is just to give Wade some kind of struggle to use as motivation to get good, and teach the audience the lesson that regardless of where you come from and the setbacks life throws your way, you can still make it in the end. The fight scene at the bowling alley was really awesome. Knuckles and Cudi duking it out looked great, the visual effects were stunning. I really loved the "do I look like I need your power" reference to movie 2. It didn't feel like a cheap callback, but instead, just a really cool way to tie it into the current plot because, well, yeah, they actually do need his power to sell it for profit. The fight ends when Knuckles gets trapped by the agents in the end, and that's all. Now let's talk about episode 2, Don't Ever Say I Wasn't There For You. We get a look at the Ice Cap Ski Resort. Whoa, a place in the real world named after the video games. This is just like Green Hills, reference, yeah! I'm kidding, by the way, I think this is actually really cool, and I really think that they should have named Las Vegas Casino Night later on in the show, but, missed opportunity, I digress. The ski resort is meant to serve as the location where they're going to try and hand over Knuckles to their boss. The spy rescue scene was extremely over the top, and I genuinely really loved it, because we all obviously know that was clearly a dream, because Wade could never. I mean, he's just not that guy, pal. And yeah, it was a dream. Because what actually happens is far more underwhelming. But again, I do have to give the show credit because it does understand that it's making fun of those spy hero movie cliches. And to be fair, seeing Wade spectacularly just botch the entire rescue was pretty funny. Pretty much everything that could have possibly gone wrong did. Agent Willoughby goes on and on about how dangerous of a villain she is when she has that monologue with Knuckles, and I really thought that her character might have had something, like a crazy dark backstory that hardened her into a cold, calculated killer, but she immediately gets knocked out by none other than our boy, Wade. Cudi's character honestly had me laughing sometimes because him getting a phone call from his mom mid-fight was actually pretty funny. Knuckles and Wade escape, and Knuckles himself glides, which was really breathtaking to watch because it's really cool seeing that in live action, and it was also really funny seeing him land and then having Wade just fall into the trash. Like, good, that's where you belong. No, I'm kidding. The episode ends with them amusingly just vibing along to the radio in the car as fugitives on the run. Episode 3, the Shabbat Dinner. This episode is when you finally realize that the show is actually just a little bit of a generic sitcom set in the Sonic universe, guest starring Knuckles. Since Knuckles and Wade have now become fugitives, they hide out at Wade's family household. This is where we are unfortunately introduced to Wade's sister, Wanda Whipple. Oh my god, bro, where do I begin with this character, man? I'm shocked because for as tolerable, sometimes likable, and admittedly somewhat humorous at times Wade can be, Wanda is nothing like that at all. She is really unlikable and honestly has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. I genuinely thought about watching something else on Paramount Plus whenever she was on screen. I was like, maybe I'll check out that new iCarly reboot. And again, she's written this way on purpose, and I feel really bad for her actress because I really hope she doesn't get any hate for just doing her job. But the best way I can describe her is like, I don't know if y'all have seen Fairly Odd Parents, but she's exactly like Vicky. Except Vicky is somewhat entertaining sometimes. Oh, and by the way, did you know she was in the FBI? Oh, you didn't? Well, she's gonna constantly remind you of that. I really wanna know how she even got into it, because she almost died to a dude with chains as a weapon. I mean, if Knuckles wasn't there to rescue her, she would have died. I mean, like, bruh, where's your gun? The whole dinner scene just drags on for far longer than it needs to, because not only does most of this have anything to do with Knuckles aside from one small conversation, it's really just two family members, grown adults, you know, by the way, a deputy sheriff and an FBI agent, arguing with each other like children. It also wasn't funny or entertaining, even if the whole point of Wade's character is he's sort of a man-child, as we clearly see in the next scene when he storms off to his room to cry in his bed. These scenes just reinforce the notion that this show is definitely much more of a children's cartoon tonally, but instead of being animated, it's just filmed in live action. We also learn more about Wade's father, Pistol Pete Whipple, a legendary bowling warrior who just so happens to be competing at the tournament that Wade's training for, which means the only reason he's in a bowling tournament is to beat his dad for approval, I guess? After bounty hunters storm the house, we get a really cool slow-mo knockout punch shot from Knuckles, and a fight scene in the kitchen with some really cool looking cinematography as the camera would be spinning around constantly, focusing on the lit candles that Knuckles and Wade's mom were defending, just to try to keep the flames alive. The funny thing is, Wade's mom literally might be stronger than Knuckles, cause she picked those pans up and bonked the heck out of those thugs in the kitchen. I mean, if anything, she should be in the FBI instead of Wanda. And the end, the house is destroyed and we move on to the next episode. Episode 4, The Flames of Disaster. This episode starts right where the last one left off, with the house in complete shambles, and it's pretty funny because this is the only time Wade is actually strong enough to open a refrigerator door. Knuckles was pretty much like completely absent from this episode because he wanted Wade to learn to get himself out of sticky situations on his own, so he mostly just guides him over the phone instead. And I'm okay with that, but like, come on, like at least cut to some shots of Knuckles. We get a good look at Knuckles' hat and motorbike, which both actually come from Jack Sinclair, Wade's bowling partner and a bounty hunter who kidnaps and traps Wade in a cage to get that cheddar. By the way, I think it's pretty cool seeing Knuckles ride a motorbike, but I'm just so used to seeing Shadow with one that I kind of feel like it's more of his thing now. While in the cage, Wade either believes really hard or straight up just dies. I honestly don't know which one it is, but it sends him up to a great battleground in the sky, which for him is of course a bowling alley. And this is where we get the most talked about part of the show, the controversial, low-budget rock opera, to learn about where Knuckles' true strength lies. Wade, wearing a Knuckles onesie of course, takes part in a musical number and reenacts Knuckles' entire backstory. I'm not gonna lie bro, the scene where Knuckles' dad turns into a puppet and gets cross-eyed when he dies, that shit was funny as f***. I can't deny that the musical has its moments, you know, when you really get past all the intentional cringe. The whole point of it is just to motivate Wade to escape the cage by explaining how Knuckles got the flames of disaster from, I kid you not, Iblis. Iblis from Facebook Marketplace, that is. Which, by the way, is another bit of product placement in the show. When Wade learns the lesson that a warrior's true strength comes from their heart, he breaks free of his cage and challenges his newfound rival, Jack, to a duel to reclaim his honor. They joke about not being able to hear each other from far away, again, cliche family movie comedy, and again, not trying to be a party pooper or anything. It's cool if it made you laugh, it's just not for me. And the funny thing is, it's followed up by comedy that actually does kind of work well for me, and in the style of this show, I think it makes the most sense, so they finally fight in what feels like a scene straight out of a Smosh video, which I personally did find amusing because it had that same over-the-top energy that those videos usually do.
I want a rematch! Wait, why do you want a rematch? You won last year.
And I know Smosh's humor can be very hit or miss. It isn't exactly peak comedy or anything, but it does work pretty well in YouTube videos or when it's more spread out in certain comedies like in this one. So I am glad that they did have some of it, but yeah, it definitely isn't gonna work in feature-length films, which is mostly why the Smosh movie really flopped. We also get to see Knuckles finally wear the OVA hat at the end, and it's just as cool as it is in all the marketing. I love that thing. And that's it for episode 4. Let's move on to episode 5, Reno, baby. The episode starts in Reno, Nevada, with Nux and Wade headed into the bowling stadium where he's going to be competing in the tournament. This is where we finally get to meet Wade's dad, Pistol Pete Whipple. We also got to hear Knuckles talk to Wade's dad through Wade, which was really funny. Cuddy and Willoughby get sent to the buyer, yes, again, that's his real name, for failing to bring back Knuckles at the end of episode 2. Apparently, he once worked for Robotnik in an earlier version of Gun. They sent out a hit on everyone associated with Robotnik after he lost his mind for obsessing over Sonic, and ever since then, the buyer's been hiding down in the underground building an empire to make ends meet. Willoughby also reveals a little bit of her backstory with how Gun betrayed her, but it wasn't nearly as compelling, so I kinda tuned it out. The buyer lets them go for now, but this time he threatens to kill them instead of compensate them if they don't bring Knuckles back to him. We cut back to a bowling training montage that once again just drags on for way longer than it needs to. His dad then gives Wade the talk, which he says he already knew about, but always wanted to have the talk. Okay. I would think there are probably more important father-son milestones you'd want to catch up on. We find out that his dad literally only left him for bowling, and then he goes on to show Wade all the cool stuff he got from his prosperous bowling career. And then he traps him. Wade's dad used all the other family members as hostages to try to get Wade to give Cuddy and Willoughby Knuckles and quit the bowling tournament. Why didn't they fire the weapon? Oh yeah, and by the way, Knuckles barely shows up in this episode as well, which I thought I was watching a Knuckles show. The episode ends with Wade being forced to lure Knuckles into the trap as he takes the elevator. Or so we think. We get to the final episode in the show. What happens in Reno stays in Reno, and it turns out that Wade told Knuckles about the trap so he knew what to expect and was able to avoid getting blasted in the elevator when the doors open. But rest in peace to whoever else was in there though. We get a pretty cool looking fight scene with cool animations and effects, and I gotta say, I feel like this is where all the budget went. I do have to give the show massive credit for being able to capture Knuckles' raw strength and cool abilities as well as they did in Sonic Movie 1 and 2. Knuckles pretty much traps Willoughby and Cuddy in between ring dimensions, and I think they're probably never going to be showing up again, so rip. But now that that's done, Wade's got to do one more thing: crush his father at bowling. So they head to the bowling tournament, and Wade's dad is such a pretentious that I really want to smack him through the screen, but again, I know he's written this way on purpose, so it's fine. It is really funny because they really play into that with Wade's dad having bowling balls that have like fine china within them. Indubitably. Wade, of course being the main protagonist, wins, but just before we can celebrate, Knuckles is thrown and smashes into the wall like the Kool-Aid Man.
Oh yeah!
The buyer drags Knuckles back outside to absorb his power, and Wade also follows them there. It's kind of crazy because even though Knuckles was kind of caught off guard, he really didn't put up much of a fight. Once his power was drained, he's dead, or more accurately, unconscious. Wade, being the genius that he is, with a lot of courage, decides that he's ready to take on the buyer in a giant, powered-up mech suit. Yep, this is gonna end well. So Wade was pretty much about to get absolutely destroyed, if not for the fact that Wanda and Wade's mom drive to the area in a pinball cart with powered-up gloves and bowling balls. Good old plot armor. Wade puts on the gloves and uses the balls as ammo to take out the buyer. As Wade is chucking the balls at the buyer, he's giving us a recap of the character arc that he went throughout the entire show while talking to Knuckles, who is currently unconscious, so I have no idea how he's hearing this, but he somehow does. But he basically goes over how the real superpower of teamwork is super important. It's really important to protect the ones you love and care about. True strength comes from within. And Knuckles now has something new to fight for, which is a home. And that reawakens Knuckles as he proceeds to crash out on the buyer. Yep, I'm never using a Gen Alpha word again. Knuckles reabsorbs his power back into himself and then proceeds to whip out the flames of disaster! And then he proceeded to morb all over the place. Wait a second. Wrong movie. And then he does this really cool looking drill move that we saw as one of the moves in Frontiers, which is really cool. So yeah, Knuckles obviously destroys the buyer, and the show ends with, I kid you not, this.
Weep not because friendship always wins. Da, 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 da.
Yep, that's pretty on brand for this type of show. So now that I've talked about all of the episodes, let's go over my final thoughts here. Overall, here's what I think. The show itself is pretty self-aware of its campy nature for the most part and doesn't take itself too seriously. But whenever it does have those more serious moments, it tends to feel a little bit out of place. It's best to go in expecting a goofy show and you'll have a great time. Otherwise, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed. And hey, like I said, I don't even really mind that the show isn't always panning back to our colorful friends all the time, but I mean, you know, the show is called Knuckles. And the human characters, aside from Wade and maybe Cuddy sometimes, weren't really all that interesting to me. So I made a list here of some things that I really liked and some things that I didn't really like, so let's just go over them really quickly. When it comes to what I liked, immediately what jumps to the top of the list would be the intro. The intro has such a cool little Newgrounds meets Diary of a Wimpy Kid feel to the animation, which was a neat little nostalgia trip. Other things I liked include some of the jokes, like when they're good, they are really good. Some of them were obviously meh, and some of them were uber cringe, which is of course intentional, but I don't care, cringe is cringe. This is probably going to be really controversial, but I truly think this is one of the best interpretations of Pachacamac because even though he isn't a bloodthirsty warlord, he's just so much more entertaining and memorable due to his jokes. Knuckles absolutely steals the show with every scene he's in. Idris Elba once again absolutely delivers a stellar performance, and it's really great seeing him learn to appreciate the smaller things on Earth as he learns to call it his true home. A lot of the other performances, especially Adam Pally's Wade, were also really solid too. There were lots of iconic battle moves that looked really stunning in the show. Now on to the negatives. Knuckles plays more of a mentor role to the main character who is really Wade, rather than he himself actually playing the main character. He's really more of like the Yoda to Wade's Luke Skywalker. Some of the jokes obviously didn't land with me, as I said before. I think the show can be a little bit slow at times, the pacing can be really off, especially when it comes to episodes 3 and 4. The music was all kind of generic licensed music. When it works, like The Warrior, I think that is a great theme for this show. Everything else is kind of like, you know. With some of the tracks, I was like, okay, this really works. And then others, I was like, I don't know, man, this one doesn't really fit too well, or, it's just kind of okay. I kind of wish we got more Sonic music, but unfortunately, we got none in the show. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that I liked and I disliked. So to wrap up my thoughts here, if you're expecting lots of Sonic Movie 3 setup, you're unfortunately going to be let down because it has like 1 or 2 hints thrown in there, but that's about it. I feel like they kind of used the IP to sort of get Sonic fans to buy Paramount Plus, knowing that hardcore fans would watch it no matter what, so all they really had to focus on was finding ways to appeal to general audiences. Personally speaking, I think a show that did take itself a little bit more seriously would have worked out way better, and I think a lot more of the community would have wanted that, but for what it is, for what the show has to offer, I think this was okay. Overall, I'd give it like a solid 5 out of 10. It really isn't the worst piece of Sonic media like everyone's saying it is. It does have its moments, but it also didn't meet my already pretty low expectations for it. But again, I'm not a movie critic, I'm not a show critic, I'm not even a game critic, I'm just mostly a Sonic fan expressing their thoughts. So let me know what you guys thought down in the comments below. Please remember to keep it civil down there, and you know, it is just my opinion, not objective fact. Thanks for watching. Thank you for watching this video. Shout out to Sonic Heroes 54, Azora, and Shadow Tart for supporting the channel directly. If you'd like to become a channel member, be sure to hit that join button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.